Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm pleased to be joined today by Michael Gandara. Michael is a nurse and founder of Nurse Michael Travels. In this episode, we'll be discussing Michael's insights on how we change the way we think about money and unlocking opportunities. Michael, welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tony. I'm really happy to be here. Excited.
Yeah, me too. Look forward to getting into it with you. Let's start off. What is your origin story?
Okay, yeah. So my origin story, I grew up in the small town, Central Texas, that keeps getting bigger every year. Both of my parents, I'd say we grew up middle class. You know, my dad is a construction worker. My mom worked various clerical office jobs. And so growing up, honestly, we didn't travel much. I realized that I went to Disney World once in elementary school early on, and then once to Vegas on my mom's work trip. And so growing up that way and, fast forwarding to college, I kind of got it ingrained in my head. It's like, oh, travel, it's really not for people like me. I get to travel whenever there's a windfall or, milestones, big birthdays, retirement, all that good stuff, honeymoon. And so that's how I grew up. After college, went through my personal finance journey, learned about saving for retirement. And so that was kind of the zone I was in. But I did make the intentional choice. Like, I do want to travel, I want to see more of the world, see some different cities. And so I did that. I was able to find some cheap flights, got to stay in some hostels, made it very affordable so I can continue my goal of saving towards retirement and these other big financial goals. And so that kind of all hit it was going great. And that kind of hit a roadblock. I met my girlfriend and my now wife. And so it wasn't a big roadblock, but there was a conversation of what we wanted out of life. And so both of us had decided that travel was a big goal of ours. And she started telling me where she wanted to go. She wanted to go to see the Northern Lights in Alaska, go to safari in Africa, all these big lofty dreams. And I was like, that's great. I was thinking about how I'm going to get to Washington, D.C. and what hostel I'm going to stay at. And so I didn't want to subject her to that lifestyle. And so something had to give. And eventually I learned about points and miles, long way of getting there, but wanted to include the love story. Learned about points and miles and how I can pay for different flights and hotels or subsidize it heavily. And so that way we can go to some of these great destinations, which we've been able to cross off the list, like Alaska and Italy, for example. And so ultimately, that's kind of how I got here. I didn't think I'd be able to travel, but now I am able to. And so I want to teach everything I know to others in a similar situation. And so that's why I created Nurse Michael Travels, to teach people, not only to inspire them, but to teach them exactly how to do it.
Well, that's awesome. But I think the inspiration part is really important because you said something where people feel like traveling's not for them, that it's just for the wealthy. So, it's inspiring that you were able to find ways with your wife to still stay on track for your goals, but also to cross the items, I guess, off the bucket list.
Yes, yes, because it's so easy just to like say, screw it. I'm just gonna pay for travel, forget the goals. And so it really took some work and some discipline to really make sure I'm able to do both. And it is a slippery slope, once you get a taste of, travel being a little bit more carefree, you just kind of want to lean into it. But it's truly an art of being able to do both. And so that's what I really try to stress in my work.
Yeah, I love that it's an art of finding balance because I think that's important is, on the flip side is people get very, you know, involved with their goals and overly committed to their goals and they don't enjoy,
Yes.
let's say the traveling while they're able to travel,
Hmm.
because when you get older, it's a little bit harder to travel. So,
Yes. Yeah, that's one
Fantastic.
thing like my nursing background really got to inform, I was in the ER for many years, and so I got to see how quickly life can change, Age is definitely like a huge thing, people wait to travel till retirement, but you're not able to do the same things as you're young. And then even if you're waiting for XYZ, life just changes all the time. So yeah, just taking advantage of moments when you can is super important.
Yeah, I love that. Take advantage of the moments when you can. So, let's go a little bit deeper now. Is what really, I mean, you've talked a little bit about it, but what inspired you to really go deep into the details of travel rewards?
Yeah, so, just I dipped my toes in first, and after that first trip, I was able to go to Cancun, and I paid maybe $100 for round trip flights and for an all-inclusive resort. That was it for two people, and so I had to dip my toes in, experience that. I was like, okay, great, this is awesome. So at that point, I realized I could take multiple vacations kind of within a year, and that's a game changer. And from there, my personality kind of took over. I love optimizing things and like just learning about things. And so I got really deep into it, learned, all about earning all the different kinds of points, which ones are better for which places you want to go to, for what kind of spending you do. And then once I get all that, I'm a natural education type personality. I'm a nurse, but I always say I'd be a teacher if I wasn't a nurse. And so once I learned everything, it's like, okay, I want to teach everyone I know. And that ultimately led me to create a YouTube channel and this platform, email newsletter, all that good stuff. So my personality just kind of took over once I learned about it.
Well, that's interesting is, because everybody has travel rewards, and I know I haven't really probably looked very closely at them. I
Right.
mean, is that what you've really created on your site then? Something for somebody like me who's kind of like, yeah, I know I have them, but
Yeah, so that was honestly me too. Like I had learned about travel credit card rewards before, and whenever I first heard about them, I just kind of wrote them off. It's like, oh, like these annual fee cards, like why would I do that when I have a free 2% cashback card type situation? But it wasn't until I really looked into like, oh, you could do this. Um, and so yeah, I created my platform just kind of with me in mind, essentially. It's like, oh, credit card rewards exist, but how does it really make sense for me? And so I kind of walk you through step by step in terms of, realizing that cashback isn't the end all be all. And it's kind of like the baseline value that you can get. And then points and miles is really, there's a little like symbol popped up.
I'm
Points
not
and
sure
miles
where
can
that came
really,
from.
yeah, being able to use points and miles, that keep the cash back is kind of like the cap on what you're able to earn. It's like $500 in rewards is just going to give you $500, and that's great. But that $500 can actually be 50,000 points. And then if you use those points leveraging different frequent flyer programs or hotel loyalty programs, depending on that program and how they, value their points, you can ultimately double, triple, or, increase that value by multiple folds. And so that's kind of exactly what I'm focused on teaching in with my channel and website is how that actually happens.
So basically, the points can have much more points in value. So you mentioned a travel rewards card. What is a travel rewards card?
That's a good question because this can kind of trip people up because you'll see different banks like Bank of America have a travel card, but ultimately when I'm talking about travel rewards, it's a specific kind of currency or the type of points and what you're able to do with those points is how I define a travel card. So I'll go ahead and tell you like the main issuers. It's going to be Chase, American Express, Capital One, Citi, um, Wells Fargo now, and then there's a program Built Rewards. I think technically they're held by Wells Fargo, but that's a different rewards currency. So those points you earn just like you would a cashback, rewards program. But what makes that key difference is the ability to transfer those to frequent flyer programs or hotel programs that issuer partners with. And so you have a flexible component of being able to use those points as cash back. If you need a cash back, you can just do that like you're familiar with. They typically have a travel portal to where you could book flights and hotels through their own website, kind of like an Expedia type situation. Or you can transfer directly to different frequent flyer programs and hotel programs. And that's where the real value is. So that's how I would define a travel card. And those are the issuers who actually have those available.
Okay. Yeah, so I want to ask you a few more questions, but the big question that I think some of us have heard about is that some of the rewards are getting more restricted right now. Have you come
Okay.
across that?
Oh, sure, all the time. So yeah, the flexibility of that's where kind of the flexibility is kind of key here and where that's most important because there are devaluations, is what we call them, all the time. So I guess to kind of define that is these frequent flyer programs or these hotel programs, they have sweet spots. So for instance, Flying Blue is a European airline. You could use 20,000 points to book a one-way flight to Europe. And that was a great deal. Just 20,000 points, which is supposed to be $200, can get you halfway to Europe. And so now they've increased that price to 25,000 points one way, which is still a good deal, but it's not as good of a deal. So that's a devaluation. And so having that flexible points, now you don't have to use Flying Blue. You can use a different airline like Virgin Atlantic, where you could book that a one-way economy flight to Europe for as low as 7,000, 9,000 points one way. And so, yes, changes in reward programs happen all the time, but having the flexible currencies really kind of give you that hedge against that. So that is one of the frustrating parts of award travel, but something that just comes with the territory, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, and I think that gets into the question I was going to ask you. I think we've already sort of answered it, is the importance of understanding the details. Um,
Yeah, so the details are important just because, you know, kind of like I was talking about, it's types of points that you're earning makes a difference. Some people earn Delta points just because they love Delta. However, if you earning 100,000 Delta points isn't the same thing as earning 100,000 Amex points, which you could use on Delta flights or you can use with another one of these carriers. And so the devil is in the details. And so, points and miles is often called a hobby for a reason, just because it's definitely a skill that you learn, but it's something that becomes fun. It's a puzzle and it's something that you really just kind of dive into. And so you get to learn kind of the ins and outs and all the details. And it's rewarding once you kind of figure out how to unlock, that super cheap flight to Europe or that super free hotel and all that good stuff.
Definitely. Well, I can see it, and I think that's helpful for people. And I think this translates to, all across our financial lives, as with any financial service or product. There's huge differences, and sometimes they're in those little details, and you can really, like I come from insurance, and if you pay monthly, that's great. It's very convenient, but you can pay an extra 8% a year in
Yeah.
premiums by paying monthly for that convenience. So it's like if you don't read the details and think about it, it can be costly. So, one of the things that you talk about are smart strategies. So how do smart strategies help unlock these opportunities?
Yeah. So strategic is kind of a big part of what I like to pay attention to. So I have like a general framework on how I recommend for people to kind of earn points and miles. Whenever I'm working with, so I guess if you're just getting started, if I'm working with clients, there's this framework I use. It's MAP, MAPP. So the first M is to map it out. So map out where all you want to go, get all your bucket list destinations. I want to go to Hawaii, Switzerland, Japan, all these different places and rank them, try to figure out where our target destinations are, just so we kind of have, a goal in mind. And then A is to analyze all the options to get there, what points need to earn, what partners would use, and, kind of figure out our game plan from there. P is the planning stage, and that's where you're actually accumulating the points and miles that you need to go to these destinations. And then the last P is pack your bags because we just booked the trip. So that's the framework I like to use with clients because I can typically, we set that goal and I can help them through the analyze phase, like, oh, these points are better for this reason, X, Y, Z. But if you're honestly just getting started and you're kind of doing a DIY approach, I would temporarily skip to just earning some type of flexible currency. And then strategize, work backwards. Okay, I can use these points for this part of the trip, but I might need to earn this card, this card, this card for the rest of the points. And so to get started, strategically, just kind of going blindly in as a new beginner, the two cards I typically recommend is the Chase Sapphire Preferred and the Capital One Venture X. The Chase Sapphire family is very forgiving for newcomers. It's very hard to redeem your points and get negative value from them. Capital One as well. And the Capital One Venture X is a premium card with a $395 annual fee. But so long as you travel once a year, it's very easy to recoup that with the benefits on there. So if you're going in blind and you're going to do a DIY approach, learning from me or from other blogs and whatnot, get started earning some type of points while you're doing so.
Yeah, and I think as you point out too, is that like with the Capital One Venture card, and neither Michael or I are endorsing either one of these cards. We're not being compensated by Chase or Capital One. We're just throwing these two cards out there. Is that sometimes that annual fee is offset by the benefits you're getting. So I think
Mhm.
that's important for people to realize is that there is a trade-off. Is sometimes, like you say, is you may want to pay that fee going in because the reward is going to be better on the other side.
Right. Yeah. And so that's kind of another part of this points and miles world itself is like figuring out those annual fees because there's other carriers like American Express who also have high annual fees, but they make it a little bit more tricky to recoup that value. You have to go to Dunkin' Donuts every month and spend $6, and that will give you $36 back and XYZ. And so making sure you know what you're getting yourself into and making sure that you're staying on top of those annual fees and assessing, is this card worth it, is going to be key long term.
Yeah, I think that's really important to understand what you're getting into. And I think that's true of any financial service or product is, is there a surrender charge? What are your commitments or obligations?
Mhm.
Um, okay, so you're someone like me and you're going,
Mhm.
okay, I've got three or four credit cards, they come with these long statements, I can log in, there's like 100,000 benefits, or it seems like that is. What is just one or two quick tips on how does someone get started with understanding their credit card rewards?
Okay, like redeeming their points or just like the general benefits of a card?
Just the general benefits, just of like, okay, where do I even get started?
Okay. Yeah. If you're looking for just the general benefits of the card, when you're applying, there's definitely, a whole list of benefits that it offers. And some of them kind of are in the details, and some of them use kind of vague words like travel protections or collision damage waiver and all these different things. But some of these are really valuable, I think, in order to kind of get a human language as far as what's really offered.
Yeah.
Different blogs and videos can help. YouTube is a big resource as well, and they kind of go deep dive into like what these benefits actually mean. With that said, with some things like the travel protections, it really is a good idea to kind of get in like after you get the card and whenever you're thinking about solely relying on this, because in some instances you can use a credit card as, your travel protection and kind of instead of travel insurance. Not in every case, but depending on what you're looking for. And those, it really does help to look at the card member pamphlet that they give you, or you can Google it on the website, on the bank's website. The fine print is going to be important, especially stuff for like medical coverage overseas, just to kind of know what they do and don't cover. Like for trip delay, they may not cover if it's just bad weather, but they will cover if, there's a mechanical issue. And so knowing the ins and outs and looking that up on your own is going to be important on the bank's website.
That's awesome. That's awesome advice. And I think that's, again, good not only with credit cards, but, across the board with any financial service or product is, especially if you feel like you're being overwhelmed with all these terms, is, as you said, do a little bit of research and find out what do these terms mean? How are they going to impact me? So,
Right.
Michael, let's switch into what I call the get ready questions. These are questions that I ask all of my guests. These are a little bit more rapid fire. The
Right.
first one is, what basic money concept do you wish people knew?
Basic money concept I wish people knew. I think really just kind of opportunity costs. That's going to be just a huge I guess, life concept, honestly. It could be very money oriented, like, delaying getting a new car and getting a used one, for investments. It could be something, points and miles related to, like, oh, maybe you should wait on getting this card because then that will block you from getting this other valuable sign up bonus while you're working on that spending, etc. But just the concept of opportunity cost, and even with your time, learning a skill versus swiping on social media, I think mastering that and fully understanding that has really benefited my life financially and just professionally in every dimension.
Well, that's great. So would you mind just giving us a definition of what you mean by opportunity cost?
Sure. Yeah. So opportunity cost is essentially whenever you're making a decision or pursuing an opportunity, that time or whatever resource you're dedicating to that, you're giving up. It comes with the cost. You're giving up whatever else you could be using with that resource, with your time, with your money, etc. Um, an example I have is like if you're spending $100 on streaming, 20 on 10 different platforms, um, but you can't afford a protein supplement or some type of healthy organic food item, but your goal is to get healthier, you're losing out on, just kind of focus that spending on where you want it to go and where you want to be, which is a healthier human being.
That's awesome. And I think that's always something, and people talk about that trading time for money and things like that is, that there is an opportunity cost for all these things that we do. And you have to understand the trade-off because all of us only have, well, most of us only have so much money.
Right.
There's
Exactly.
few people in the world that have a lot of money, but for most of us, we're making those
The
decisions all
rest
the
of us.
time. So the next question is, what is one simple thing people can do each year to set themselves up for financial success?
A financial review of some sorts. That sounds very, intense or whatever. But whenever I think of that, I really just talking about like once a year at least, ideally more often, however often you need to, but just kind of figure out where you're spending money. But aside from that, like also figure out where you want to be spending money, like what is important for you in life and how can money be a tool or a resource to make that happen, essentially. New Year's is often time frame to do it, kind of reevaluating what you've done the previous year, what you want to do differently. I think birthdays or even the beginning of the month is a good time to do that. But I think that would be a super helpful resource or action someone could take.
Yeah, I recommend that to everybody that they go through and review everything. And for people who are part of the Get Ready Money Club, that is the whole point of the club is that you review different areas of your financial life each week. So, as part of that, is that also something where you feel it's important to engage your significant other in that conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about New Year's in general, is, reflecting on all the good things we got to do, the trips and look at photos and all that good stuff, but also, what do we want our life to look at now? It was funny, we were doing that just not too long ago. And, we had talked about money stuff, but also life stuff. And we had like all these different things, like a 5-year plan. And then we looked at this year, it's like completely different from what it was last year. And so it was just really helpful, from a life standpoint. It's like, oh, wow, life's changed. And like, these are now our priorities, but also money wise, it's like, okay, this is how our money has changed and what we plan on doing in the future, how that impacts, our short-term, intermediate-term decisions and whatnot.
Well, and that's awesome. And I'm really glad you pointed out because that's one big reason to review everything is those things change and your goals change and your situation changes. So, that's another reason to have the reviews.
Mhm.
Um, so Michael, the next question is, what is one habit that people can change when it comes to their money?
One habit that they can change. Um, I hate to risk sounding redundant, but being intentional, just with your actions and with your money, really trying to figure out, it's so easy like to just give up in the moment. Like, ooh, this smoothie sounds really good. This cookie from Crumble or from Tips Treat sounds really good. But when instead you have something at home that you should eat or, a smaller sweet or, just kind of being intentional what you're spending on money on and what you're doing and if that goes towards your goals. And that can relate to travel as well. Are you trying to buy this new electronic. And if travel is really what you want to do, it still costs money, even with points and miles. You got to pay for the annual fee, for the taxes and fees. So really being intentional with what kind of person you want to be and making sure your money goes to that.
I like that you also added in what type of person you want to be, because I think that we don't, sometimes we put money as its own separate thing, but it really is a part of who we are,
It is.
and that our financial decisions have an impact through the rest of our lives.
Yeah. I just revisited James Clear's Atomic Habits, the book. I don't know if you've read it. It's a pretty popular book
A
nowadays.
little bit of
Uh,
it.
yeah. And so it really talks about like your habits being just a reflection of who you are currently. And so you have to like change your habits to become the person you want to be. And then so yeah, that I think is directly attributable to finances, personal finance, and like, spend the money on who you want to be versus the person you are if that's not who you want to be.
I like that. Spend the money on who you want to be, because I think that is pretty important to consider that when we're talking about our goals, is that you don't have to be who somebody else wants you to be. Is, you can be who you want to be, and your money can help you get there. Some of my other podcast episodes from my listeners know that we've talked about impact philanthropy and, you know,
Mhm.
giving, purposeful giving, and so there's a trend here. So I'm
Yes.
glad you're sharing as part of that. So Michael, what money myth are you trying to break?
Money myth. There's so many. I guess one simple one common one that comes up whenever we start talking about credit cards and travel rewards is what does this do to my credit score? So, will opening up all these credit cards or this credit card, that credit card hurt my credit score? And so, a funny thing people don't know is that opening up credit cards, they see that you'll get an initial maybe slight decrease in your credit score. Let's say it's 780, it'll go down to like 765, 770, hypothetical numbers. Don't know how much it will actually decrease. But over time, what will actually happen is that it increases. And so the reason that is because new credit, having hard inquiries, that factors into like 10% of your credit score. However, your credit utilization or how much you owe, that will take up like 35% that makes up 35% of your credit. And so that's really calculated by your credit utilization ratio. And so, which is how much you owe compared to how much money or how much credit you have to, spend on. And so what happens by applying to a credit card or multiple credit cards over time, you get that initial dip, which is that 10% decrease, but over time you have a lot more credit to where the $100 that you may have on your statement is a drop in a bucket compared to the 10,000, 15,000 you have on your credit versus if before that was $100 on 1,000 credit limit. So your credit utilization goes down and your credit goes up over time. So opening credit cards does not hurt your credit score. It actually increases it over time.
Yeah, well, and I think that's important because I think people, credit scores are very complicated, and
Yes.
it's not always straightforward. It's like I was trying to explain to someone else. It's like, well, if you close a credit card, it's actually going to have a negative impact. Well,
Yes.
I mean, because you would think, well, that's less money that you'd have to pay back, but it's the opposite of effective.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I always recommend canceling any annual fee cards that you're not using that doesn't bring any value that's causing you to lose money. But if it's a no annual fee card, especially if it's an old one or one that you had for a long time, definitely don't cancel that.
Yeah, it's counter logic, but it
Yeah.
is what it is.
Yeah.
So, let's get out the time machine for a minute. What advice would you give your younger self if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about money?
Okay. I was thinking about this. I have two of them. Well, first off, part of me wants to say, I wouldn't change anything. I love where my life is, all that good stuff. If we're getting real, what I would really change, I would probably try to open up a Roth IRA, as I was 16 or get a custodial Roth IRA, whatever. Start trying to contribute that as much as I could. Wouldn't be much, but it'd still be a head start compared to when I did start. But on the points and miles front, I have a story or video about this. I accumulated like $2,000 in city rewards. What I would have done instead, I wish I would have earned Chase rewards. So I would have gotten like a Chase Freedom Unlimited instead of a City Double Cash. That's for the points and miles folks out there.
There you go. Well, that's a little more niche, but I
Yeah,
mean, but I think that is important is because, basically it's like, if probably doing a little more research at the time, but we all learn and that's part of the learning curve. Um,
absolutely.
so what is your number one go-to favorite money resource for yourself, whether it's a podcast, book, newsletter app, or website?
Gotcha. Personal finance information. I haven't really dove into much lately. The Personal Finance Club on Instagram is kind of my regular dose that gets me like back into the world of like personal finance and long-term investing. I'm kind of on autopilot right now. So there's someone that keep popping up in my feed. And I've honestly have been like doing a little bit more deeper dives into your podcast. And I love learning about different topics that I haven't learned yet. Like I just started before we got on here about speaking with your parents about long-term plans. And so I really enjoyed the guests you've been having and the different topics that you've been covering. So kudos to you, Tony.
All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate the shout out. So thank you. Yeah, that was an amazing episode, and that just came out. So, for listeners who haven't checked it out, it's, talking to your aging parents about what's your plan. It's called Mom and Dad, What's Your Plan?
Mhm.
It's an important conversation that we all need to have with our parents. So, to wrap up, Michael, what is your number one tip on changing the way we think about money?
My number one tip on changing the way we think about money. I guess it's really just to learn about money, honestly. Like really just kind of do your research and like make this a part of your life, you know. It's not a topic that's going away anytime soon. So there's a lot of different niche topics and really just making the effort to learn and understand not only different things that you find on the internet, but also look up the reasons why not to do something that you find on the internet. That's always big part of my research. Like why universal life insurance? Why not universal life insurance and whatnot? And so, really just opening up that desire to learn about financial topics and building that can really change your life.
Yeah, I love that. Open up the desire to learn because I think that's something that we don't spend much time on is learning. And unfortunately, we don't learn about that in school.
Yeah.
We learn about so many other things that may be questionably useful or not useful, but money's definitely useful and we don't learn much about it. So, and I've had on other medical professionals, and that's definitely something that they've expressed time and time
Yes,
again.
absolutely.
So where can people learn more about you? Where can they check out, where do you hang out on social media and find your website?
Yeah, so my website houses everything. So if you fall back on anything, nursemichaeltravels.com is where you can find all my stuff. But I'm mostly on YouTube. I post weekly every Thursday, different points of miles video covering different topic. LinkedIn is where you see me post and just kind of hang out and comments and stuff like that there. So you can find me at LinkedIn. Michael Gandara is my name. And yeah, but nursemichaeltravels.com, that's where I am. And then you also find my newsletter there as well, where you can catch me weekly.
Awesome, awesome. Well, appreciate it. And for everybody watching and listening, as always, there'll be links to Michael's website, YouTube channel, and LinkedIn profile so you can reach out and connect with him and check out his newsletter and the website and everything. So, Michael, thanks for joining us today on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tony. True pleasure being here.
Yeah, this is fun. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change your way about money, please be sure to subscribe and to tell a friend. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.